Hello folks, J. Scott Phillips here. Welcome to my channel. And today we are bound for survival with a look at Richard Harding's 1984 piece of literary trash, The Outrider. Now, The Outrider was the first of 5 Outrider novels written in 1984 and 85. And they follow the adventures of a post-nuclear apocalyptic vigilante named Bonner and his rabble of arsonists and assassins that travel with him around the country. And they're the good guys. So I should mention that this is an offering for GarbAugust. That's a booktube event that was created last year by Ollie over at CRIMINOLLY. And it is to try to get us to celebrate literary trash, trashy fiction, garbage, that kind of thing. And I will leave a link to his announcement video for it this year in the description down below, and as well as his list of co-hosts who are all trying to get us to read trashy fiction this month. And also to understand why reading trash can be so much fun. And I have to say that I've never set out to read trash before. Not that I haven't inadvertently, or maybe even without knowing sometimes. But this was intentional with this book, and it was a lot of fun. So this is a great event, and I just wish that I had started with this video earlier. I meant to get this video out the first week of August because Ollie has divided the month of August up into different weeks, each week focusing on different categories of trashy literature. And again, I'll let him explain all that in his announcement video linked down below. But I will just say that week 1 was to celebrate category romances or men's adventure. And I went with men's adventure with The Outrider here. And so we'll talk about that and why it was so much fun. And I have never heard anybody else talking about the Outrider series, so not sure that you may have come across it or not. You might want to check it out, though, if you like this sort of a thing. But we'll get into that in a minute here. For now, let's take a look at the author, Richard Harding, who I kind of doubt that you have heard of him, unless you're familiar with the Outrider series, and it did have a lot of fans back in the 80s. And but you may be familiar with some of his work inadvertently under his actual name, Robert Tine. And he used Richard Harding as a pseudonym for the Outrider books. But let's take a look at Robert Tine, and maybe you have read something by him. Who knows? And I could not find any author portrait of him anywhere online, but he was born in Providence, Rhode Island. So while we chat about him, we'll start off with a look at Providence from back in the day. And Robert Tine wrote about 5 or 6 original novels. And he lived in Italy in the 1980s, where 2 of his novels were set around in and around Rome and the Vatican, and those 2 novels were State of Grace and Black Market. And they were both set in Italy, which was an area that he was familiar with. But he started to make his real money in writing novelizations for the big theater releases that were coming out through the 80s and 90s. And those movies covered a lot of different genres. As we scroll by some of them here, you can kind of see the titles that we might be familiar with, and you've probably seen at least some of these movies. And these are probably the books of his under the name of Robert Tine that you may have read. And I think it's kind of safe to say that these are the kinds of books that readers will buy because they're interested in the movie that is being adapted here, and not because they're necessarily looking for books written by Robert Tine. So his name is somewhat unfamiliar outside of the publishing industry. Although he did make a bit of a name for himself, although it wasn't his actual name, in the mid-'80s when he started to write the Outrider series, which, as I mentioned, was set in a post-nuclear apocalyptic United States. Now, this book was meant to cash in on the popularity of the Mad Max films, which I have to admit, I was never really a big fan of those. But I gotta tell you, this book was a blast. Lots of fun. Now, it is set in this post-apocalyptic United States here after some bombs have dropped everywhere. The whole United States is just bombed out ruins of all the major cities. And we're never really told about the history of that war, whatever that might have been, or if it is just the United States. You kind of get the impression that it is probably worldwide. Canada is mentioned, and it's in a similar state. But we really only see the United States, and in this particular book, starts off in Chicago. That's where Bonner, our hero, is based. And he is trying to get to Washington, D.C., which is only known in this world as the Cap. And but we don't have any background of the war, or what caused it, or why, or who was involved in it, and none of that. We don't know, and it doesn't matter. I take it from certain clues in the book. It's, again, never really stated, but it's probably within 100 years or so of that cataclysm. Maybe 50 to 100 years, something like that. Some things are still working. They can still get parts for things they're trying to put together. There's no power. All the power is out, so there's no electricity grid. So they're all having to use oil lamps. There's gasoline, if you can get it, so they can keep certain types of engines running. But gasoline is at a premium and is ruthlessly dealt with and for. Very expensive. You may pay with it for your life to get it, depending on who you're hanging around with or where you find it, and if you can. So that's running out. But Bonner himself starts off where he is living in Chicago, and someone comes after him with a message. They're really there to kill him, but they're trying to lure him to the Cap. His adversary in this book, and I believe continues through most of the series, is this guy called Leather. And he and Bonner used to run together as Outriders. We don't know what Outriders are exactly. Now, if I understand the term, Outriders are usually a term that are meant for people that would ride shotgun alongside stagecoaches or other vehicles that are carrying valuable goods or important people, and they are riding to protect this other main vehicle. Or sometimes they might be considered, I guess in modern day, to be the Secret Service that are surrounding the president. That is sort of what an outrider is to me anyway. It's never really explained in this, except that we know that the Outriders once roamed the roads, the highways, that or what's left of them in the United States, and trying to protect the people as much as they can from all the outlaws and cutthroats and all the people who are just out there trying to survive. It's a very violent world, and this book has a lot of graphic violence throughout all of it. So if that bothers you in reading, you probably don't want to read this, because there is a lot of very graphic violence all throughout. And in fact, it is really touting that type of violence. That's the kind of thing that I think you might be coming to this book to read, just to experience how gruesome humanity could be to each other when it's just out to survive, and everybody is just every man for himself, or woman for herself, trying to look out for themselves. And there are factions, and Bonner has a kind of a network of friends that he knows. They all seem to be scattered now. He comes across them on his journey to Washington, D.C. And I guess just to back up for a second, the reason that he's going to the Cap, as they call it, where Leather is that the guy who came to assassinate Bonner at the beginning, Bonner took care of him pretty quickly within a couple of pages here. But that guy told Bonner that Leather has Dara, and that Dara is Bonner's true love. His is the romantic interest, and she's being held captive and probably being tortured and other things. But she is still alive, and he had thought that she was long dead. So now he has reason to believe that she is alive, so he's got to go and rescue her somehow. And along the way, he meets other people that he has worked with or has at least heard of. They all start to band together. They all have other reasons to go to the Cap or to deal with Leather for their own reasons. But they all know and respect Bonner anyway, because he's got this tremendous reputation of being quite a fighter, and people look up to him for protection. They may not all like him, but they trust him and will pitch in with him for their own purposes in many cases. Others of them are just true friends and associates of his that have worked with him or working with them, but has traveled with him and relied on each other in the past. So it's a really good mixed bag of characters all along the way. He keeps kind of picking them up as he's traveling across the bombed out distances between Chicago and the Cap to get there. So it's a little bit of the Wizard of Oz story here, where he's on an adventure and he picks up helpers along the way. And they're all looking for the wizard. In this case is Leather, and he has set himself up running the slave states. That's what the southern states and the eastern states are called now. And he's kept Washington, D.C., the capital, as his base of operations. And Leather has always been trying to lure Bonner to work with him again, because they, like I said, they rode together as outriders in the past. And so Leather has a history of had at one time trying to help people, but at some point he realized that he could really usurp the power that he was gaining as an outrider and take over a large part of what's left of the United States. And he feels that Bonner would be a good partner to run the west side of the United States, what they call the hot states. So they've been trying to work, or Leather has been trying to work with Bonner, but Bonner doesn't want to have anything to do with them now, except to get Dara free and safe from there. So for me, some of the fun of this book, like I've mentioned in some other videos, a lot of books that I tend to have a close spot in my heart for are things that are somewhat familiar. And settings, if I'm familiar with the setting, I'll enjoy that story a little bit more. And what's more fun than seeing places that you're familiar with as Bonner travels through that are bombed out and just remnants and ruins of our once great civilization here in the United States, just in smoking ruins, burnt out, and completely incomprehensible to the people in the story here, because they have no concept of life before the bombs. And in fact, there's one scene that takes place in the baseball stadium in Philadelphia, and that's a kind of a place where they're going to meet, but they're also getting ambushed there. But at one point, when they first show up there, all the guys with Bonner are looking up at these vast rows and rows of seats, empty seats that look down over this playing field. And they just have no idea what this could be. And Bonner, who has been reading, he's always been a reader, so he knows more than probably anybody in this society, but he doesn't understand the life before the bombs. He just knows, and he explains to them, that this arena here was built for a sport, for a game. Players would come out and play a game here, and all the seats up there were for people who would come out with nothing else to do to watch the game. And that was unfathomable to the people that are with him, unfathomable to the people that are with him. They don't understand why would they come out just to watch these people play a game on a field? And then somebody asks, well, if they're sitting up there, are they armed? Can they shoot at the players? No, they wouldn't shoot at the players. They would just watch whatever this game was. They don't understand. And there's all kinds of little things like that throughout. As they're traveling along, they'll see movie posters in a bombed out alley or something, and they don't understand what movies are, what these posters are. Just those kinds of things all over the place. And lots of fun. But it is a game of survival, and Bonner does finally get to the cap, and there's this huge confrontation towards the end at the Lincoln Memorial. And that's the throne. That's where Leather has set up his throne. Somehow he's outfitted this giant statue of Lincoln there in the memorial with pillows and robes and fancy things and all that. So he sits on Lincoln's lap as his own throne, and a very bloody, very violent confrontation happens there. So if that kind of thing disturbs you when you're reading, don't read this book. Now, that is where we finally come across Dara. And I have to say that I was worried about this particular scene because I don't mind reading a lot of this really graphic violence in many cases because it's so over-the-top cartoonish that it's really hard to kind of accept as a real human activity. It's just so outlandish. But they are threatening Bonner with doing things to Dara in front of him as he's being held back and is helpless that I did not want to read about. I was prepared to set the book down because that kind of thing really disturbs me. I don't want to read that for entertainment. But I will say that the author here, Robert Tine or Richard Harding, whatever we call him, takes you right up to the minute that kind of thing is going to happen to her, and then something intervenes and changes the arc of the story here. But he takes you right up to the edge of that one. He will cross the line in anything else, but there's that one thing anyway that I appreciate that he stopped at before continuing. But a really rip-roaring read, I have to say, and set up for a sequel. Of course, there were 4 other books. There was going to be a 6th book in the series, but apparently the publisher went out of business before that could happen. I think the last of the 5 books actually has an announcement in it for the next book coming out a few months hence, but that never happened. Now, as I like to do on my channel here, I like to talk about artwork, and there is a cover for this, and the whole series has similar covers as a family of connected novels here. So let's take a couple of minutes here and look at the cover art for this particular book. This cover was illustrated by Michael Meritet, an artist that I know nothing about. I couldn't find any information about him at all online, and or any other books other than a few of these Outrider covers that he's ever done. I'm sure he did some other work, but as far as an action-adventure book goes, this is, to me, just a complete fail. Now, imagine all of the action-adventure books that you are familiar with or have ever read, whether they're men's adventure, science fiction, fantasy, thrillers, anything that's showing the hero in either some kind of a pose or a situation from the book, whatever it is, how action-based those illustrations, the best ones anyway, are. There's just action-adventure, something that really pulls you into that book. This is our big action hero, Bonner, the vigilante who is so adept at fighting, at getting out of scrapes. This guy is a tough son of a bitch, and this cover is just falls so short of what happens on the pages of this book here, unfortunately. Now, Michael Meritet is obviously working from photos of a model, and I think they just dressed this guy up to have the leather jacket and the jeans that are described in the story, so that's accurate. But this guy's face here, Bonner's face in this painting, is just looks bored. He doesn't care what's going on. He doesn't necessarily look tough, other than he's got the sleeves of his leather jacket rolled up, and he's got these 3 knives. Now, the 3 knives are mentioned over and over and over throughout the book. So Bonner is adept at throwing knives and cutting with knives when he's in fights. However, He's also armed with all kinds of assault weapons strapped over his back. He's got bandoliers of all kinds of ammo wrapping around him. He travels with other people that just have ordnance heaped on top of them all over the place. We don't see any of that. And he is also associated with this mechanic in Chicago who keeps a kind of a war wagon running for Bonner whenever he needs it. And he takes that from Chicago to the Cap in this book. And the descriptions of that war wagon, doesn't really have a name, but I'm calling it a war wagon. It's made out of just things that this guy, Lucky, can piece together. I would have loved to have seen just that vehicle on the cover here. That thing was well armed. Its engine was from some old kind of a fighter jet or something. So this thing was a souped up, unheard of a road beast of a vehicle here. Wouldn't it have been better to see something like that instead of just this guy standing here? I imagine at this photo shoot, he's standing and saying, okay, what do you want me to do? Stand here? Okay, take another action, another pose, turn this way, turn that way. He's not even doing that here. You might see it on some of the other covers a little bit. We'll get to that in a second. But for me, a complete fail of depicting this action hero that is so great in the book. The cover just leaves it so short. Then we see in the background, we see what is probably the ruins of the Cap of Washington, D.C. We can see on the far right here what is supposed to be the Capitol building. That's where all the gasoline is stored now. And the dome is collapsing, showing absolutely no care to the actual architecture or the structure inside the dome. Instead, they just, Meritet here, just painted these weird little girders there that are, there's no way that's the way the Capitol is built. We see the remnants of the Washington Monument next to that with just a big hole on one of the corners. Now that's a shame. I could have seen a scene where they painted that like it's described in the book. That the Washington Monument is crumbled, about only a third of it left standing, and Leather, our bad guy, keeps gasoline and other things that he can burn in that is like this big chimney, an eternal flame, always burning all day and all night forever. And wouldn't that itself would have made a better cover, showing nothing else but just half of the Washington Monument with this flame gushing out of the top of it. There's no other, we see these buildings here, they're falling apart, but there's no rubble, there's no trash, debris, anything on the streets. Looks like they keep this place pretty tidy. We've cleaned away all the rubble, but they've left the building standing. This cover is just a fail to me, and I'd really like to know what you think about it. Am I wrong? Well, let's take a look at the other covers from the Outrider series here and see if we could do any better at all. And not really. Now, the first three books here, the June, July, and December 1984 covers, were all painted by Meritet. And to me, it's pretty clear that this was a photo shoot where they got this model to stand dressed with the three knives, the leather jacket, and the jeans, with absolutely no expression on his face, just like I said, just saying, what do you want me to do? So they took a shot of him standing there. Then they said, maybe, lean one direction or the other. Let's take one with your arms down. Let's take one with your arms up. Those were all shot on the same day. And then Meritet had those series of photos to work from. Then on the backgrounds, he's painting the ruins of different cities and things where those other books are taking place. But that's it. There's just no action in any of these. I wouldn't pick this book up had I not read the description about it, and I was specifically looking for something for GarbAugust here, and the description of the stories captured me. These covers I just don't think would do it. If you've never heard of Bonner, he's not a character that you would know from movies or comics or anything else. Why would you pick these up if they were on the book stands in front of you back in 1984? I don't know. Would you have? Maybe you would have. If they were maybe in the section that you would pick up and read the back of the book and you'd buy it that way, perhaps? I don't know. Now, the last two books here, clearly a different artist, although I don't have a name for whoever this is. Following suit, we have a different model, but here it looks like these last two books, the February and July of '85, we just have a couple of shots of the same model here, shifting, you would think, from one leg to the other, but no, all they did was they took two different pictures, one with his arms down, one with his arm up, and on the last book here, they flopped him. You just notice that the lighting is from the other direction, all the knives on his belt are on the other side, and that's it. So the publisher went out of business after this fifth book here. I wonder if the sixth book would have had a similar cover here by this second artist. We'll never know. Now, this was a video that I was hoping to be just the first of several GarbAugust video entries, but I don't know how far I'm going to get. But one of the things that is pretty cool that CRIMINOLLY has developed for his booktube event here is a GarbBingo card. And that is a card that has squares on it marking off different categories or different aspects of the trashy literature that you can hopefully fill up a row or fill the card or whatever on the GarbBingo card. So I've only got this one book so far. I'll add to it if I get a chance to by the end of the month. But I'll just show it to you here. And two of the squares that I have been able to mark off have been under the second column, a vigilante book, which Bonner is definitely a vigilante, unless vigilante means operating outside the law. And technically, I guess, in this post-apocalyptic world of Bonner's, there is no law. So is he really a vigilante? But he acts like a vigilante, and in any other book, he would be a vigilante. So I'm going to count that. And then also, down at the bottom of the fourth column, a book published under a pseudonym. So we have Robert Tine writing as Richard Harding. And so hopefully, if I have the time, maybe I'll even spill it into September, maybe, I'll be able to add to that GarbBingo card. So I'd like to thank Ollie at CRIMINOLLY for this event. A lot of the people that you might follow on BookTube here are having a great time with reading trashy literature for GarbAugust. I know this one book so far that I've gotten into at this point, I had a great time reading it, and this is a fun video to put together. And part of the thrill of this was just the horrible cover for me. So maybe you enjoyed that too. So I'd like to thank CRIMINOLLY for the BookTube event. And like I say, hope to get to a couple more here this year. And if not, then we'll just go full bore next GarbAugust. And there you have it, folks. So let me know what you think of those covers down below. Are you familiar with the Bonner series, the Outrider books at all? I'd never heard of them before I launched into GarbAugust here. So let me know what you think. Do you have another men's adventure series that you really like that we didn't chat about here today? Let me know, and we'll get together again soon and chat some more. In the meantime, go find something trashy to read, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot.